Hello. Happy Thursday. Good afternoon. You can probably tell, but I slept really great today and apparently was exhausted when I fell asleep because I still have makeup on my face that I have yet to take off. Because I woke up and I had like a million things to do before I got on here. I think we're in the middle of a basement project that I'm starting to think is going to be like a Congress effort of redoing something that's going to take years and years. Anyways, so if we haven't met yet, I'm Bree. I'm an RN NP mentor, interview strategist, content creator, educator, all of the above, critical care. And we do this weekly live, talk about professional stuff and clinical stuff, critical care related. So I'm glad if you stumbled onto this. We're also going to, put on makeup because who doesn't enjoy watching that? Mr. Midwife is here. So glad you're here. He is my loyal friend who shows up every week. And Scott, Nurse Scott is here too. I was really hoping you would be here today, Scott, because today we're going to be talking about qualities of what I consider to be the perfect nurse practitioner student. This is all opinion related. However, it's highly curated. I've talked to a lot of people. Yay, the best students. I talked about it a lot because this is the kind of stuff that, like, when I was in school and thinking about going back to school, I obsessed over, like, holy crap, if someone could just tell me what to do before I go in there so I don't look like a dummy and I shine. There's just not a lot of information out there. There's really not. And the schools, depending on what school you go to, there may be great guidance or you may never see or hear from a professor, really. So I have been precepting students for probably since like 2017, I guess. So I don't know how long is that? Math is hard. 6 years. And I feel like I have a student. Yeah, I have a student every single semester. I don't think there's ever been a semester where I haven't had a student. So I've seen a lot of different types of people come through. And there's another NP in my group who loves to precept. She's been there. We joke that she was born at that hospital, but I respect her a lot in regards to how she teaches. She's very good at engaging others. And we did a YouTube, like a formal video, if you will, not a live, last summer, I think it was. And I thought it was really great. I mean, obviously I thought it was really great, but just the kind of things that I would have wanted to know. And she and I are kind of on the same page. So I think I represent the masses in the information I share. That's my caveat. I'm a few steps behind. I'm usually a little better prepared for this. I've already got the moisturization done. I've already got the old makeup off. And today I was like, my little alarm went off. I was like, oh crap, I gotta be live in 10 minutes. It's a good thing this is a get ready and not already ready live. So let me see. I'm going to have to figure out glasses here soon, y'all. Yeah, nobody told me anything, Mr. Midwife. Yeah, same. I went into it totally blind. Now, are we talking classroom or clinical? Clinicals. Yeah, I should clarify that, shouldn't I? Because it's a little different. Your teachers in the classroom are going to think their class is the most important and the only thing you are doing at that moment in time. That is what my quality teacher thought during the summer semester, shortest semester with the most amount of clinical hours. And my gosh, the amount of projects, like group projects, papers, and meaningless crap was ridiculous. I mean, I really think that she just really valued her information. Her class is the most important. Like, dude, I'm trying to learn 30 diseases this week alone. Like, I don't learn quality crap. There's very few people who I think really are interested in that kind of thing. But yes, everybody thinks their thing is the most important thing and the only thing you're doing right now. And I will say that, in the blog that I wrote this week and in the video that we did last year, the running theme of this whole thing is some of this is very hard to hear. It can come across as very nitpicky, very critical. But it really truly comes from a place of love and wanting to see you, shine, wanting to see you go into things prepared. And honestly, the caveat I wrote in the blog was, if you're reading this is probably not targeted to you because you are not that kind of student. Because to talk about what makes a good NP student in clinicals, we have to talk about what makes a bad student in clinicals. This is all curated from real life stuff. So if I mention this stuff, it may sound ridiculous. It's because there are truly students who exhibit this behavior, truly. And that's why we have to talk about it. Some of it's going to be like ridiculous, like nonsense stuff that you're like, well, yeah, of course. But we say that because if you know going into it that others are performing this poorly, you know how well you're shining, right? So again, this comes from a place of love. I'm going to say this a lot. I know it's hard to hear. It sounds critical. It's not intended to be mean. Scott says, I'm done with all but one of the classroom for the semester. Really? What are we, April? We're just starting April? Wow, that's cool. Pharmacy is hard. Pharmacy is a hard class. That was one of the harder ones for me. I would say my research class, my pharmacy class, and the pathophys were all tough classes. Tough classes. Okay, let me get a little bit of foundation going on here before we get too much further into the day. Clinical start in 6 weeks. Yay. Scott, are you doing, are your clinicals, it sounds like you're doing blocks where you do just a few months of class and nothing but class. It didn't break. Don't worry. And then followed by a block of, weeks or months of just clinicals. That is how my school is set up, and holy cow, what a blessing it is if you have a curriculum like that, because it allows you when you're in class to focus on class and in clinicals focus on clinicals. Part of the problem I see in most NP students in clinicals is that their brain is going in 20 different directions. You've got quizzes and tests, and you're probably still trying to work. So you're trying to squeeze in some work, and you've got a family and a life outside of this. And so their brain is really pulled in so many different directions that it's hard to bring them into focus in what we're doing that day on clinicals, and then doing stuff outside of clinicals to extend their learning. It's hard to get them to kind of prioritize that because they're just pulled in so many directions. So I completely get it because I was there. Mr. Midwife said, had a student love doing cardiac workup? Do we do it? Okay. Yes. I will say this. You can tell NPs who have had everybody sees things through the lens of their expertise, right? So when I get a nurse practitioner student who, has spent the majority of their time in the OR, they're going to be very methodical, and they're going to like procedures, because I've had that person before. But sometimes thinking through the medicine of things was a real challenge for her. You can tell the background that people have and what they bring to the NP space, because the default is, and this is something we'll talk about in a minute, the default is when you're in a situation where you are so overwhelmed, you have no idea what you're doing, you don't want to look stupid, you've been reading nonstop, and you're just massively overwhelmed, is to default to what you know. And for most NP students, most of them have, for what we do, they have nursing background. So they default to being a nurse. Yeah. 6 core courses, then health assessment, then primary care 2, then practicum. Yikes. Or you throw stuff on the floor. I mean, I got to keep it entertaining here, right? At least, okay, you would have seen me cry. It would have been really entertaining had this broken, because this, my friends, dudes, y'all are going to love this. Charlotte Tilbury, Flawless Foundation. This is an insane amount of money. And if this had broken, I would literally cry. You would see very sad face here. Lecture classroom component to all clinical courses. Yeah, we had that too, but it was like we did that part first. For ours, it was called A and P. No, acute and chronic, and then it had a number behind it. And it was the classroom portion of it for 6 weeks, and then a block of clinicals for 6 weeks, and then another 6 weeks of classes. So I really loved that, because I was working PRN, so I could group my work days in with my clinicals, and it made for I think there was one semester where 19 straight 12-hour shifts between clinicals and work, and it was horrible. But at least I wasn't stressed out about tests, so I was able to really focus on clinicals. I think we start clinicals on day 1 each term. So, okay, so they're simultaneous. Yeah, that's how I find every other student I've ever had has been on that. So I don't know, maybe Emery's the only one who does block scheduling like that. But Anywho, so all right, so I opened this thing with the caveat I already told you about. Uh, have y'all ever read? I'm gonna say it wrong. I didn't write it down. The 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. Um, Believe it or not, one of the cool things that my kids' elementary school did was have the kids read the kid version of that. And I love that because it just kind of highlights the things that people who are successful in life are doing unconsciously that they don't realize they're doing to set them up for success. And the number one thing being beginning with the end in mind. Oh, it's a great book. It's a great book. I think it's really, really good for kids. I mean, it's good for adults too, but uh, basically anyone who's struggling with some emotional maturity and getting things done in life. It's good for those kind of people. But anyways, they talk a lot about one of the top 7 qualities being someone who's thinking ahead, someone who is like going into a hard task or a hard season of life already preparing for what it's going to be like when it ends. And that allows you to really truly focus your goals and your priorities when you're in the throes of things that are super overwhelming. And I can't think of anything more overwhelming than NP school. It's horrible. In part because I, it's been very, very few and far between that I've met NPs who are not actively working while they're in school, which again, I was only PRN, so it was like 6 weeks. I was required to do 6 shifts in a 6-week time frame. And that wasn't much. Some of these kids coming in here are working full time. I do not know how they are doing it. I do not know how they're doing it. It's insane to me. Another great read, Scott says, is Influence, Science, and Practice. Okay. I love good. I'm not a big time self-help guru. Not like that. Like I will get obsessive about podcasts and I've listened to nothing but business podcasts for a year and a half, but I do like periodic stuff like that. I love to listen to it when I'm walking. So I will put that on my list. Okay. What else did I think? Get the radar back on here. Yeah, we talked about. Okay, so again, this is going to bounce back and forth between things you should do and things you shouldn't do. I have to tell you the bad stuff in order for you to avoid that and to do the opposite of that. So one of the things I start by talking about is what I've already alluded to, and that is the fact that when you're pulled in a million different directions, clinicals don't seem to be the priority. And so some students, and again, this is just some, but when they come in for their rotation, you can tell that their mind is somewhere else. And they're just less engaged, right? It seems like it's a checkbox to get done. You can tell the people who have no interest in critical care and they're just trying to get this rotation or elective done. You can tell the people who feel like they are very, very, very outside their comfort zone, which everybody should be, but I mean, I'm talking extremely outside, and they just shut down. And so they tend to focus on everything else, the test next week, this, so when there's downtime during our clinical day, they're not trying to expand upon the learning that we've been doing. They're studying for a test, or their students will often log their patients while they're in clinical. So that I'm familiar with Typhon. There's a lot of different systems that schools use in order to track the patients that you're seeing. I think that is perfectly acceptable. I did that during my rotations too. So that's not necessarily what I'm talking about, because again, that's still kind of focusing on what we're doing. But obviously, this is selfish, but when you're in my world and I am taking the time to teach, because let's be honest, and you don't really realize this until you become an NP and start teaching. Teaching as an NP preceptor is 180 degrees different than teaching as a nurse preceptor. There is no middleman. And that is one of the points I'm going to bring up. Most NP students have very little interaction with their school, their professors. I have very little interaction with them, as opposed to nursing where, an adjunct faculty is going to bring in 6 little baby nurses and is going to, follow her little ducklings around all day and check in. And she or he is going to expand upon the teaching that the primary nurse is doing. We don't have that, right? So it's just me and you. It's just me and you. We set the rules. We set the expectations. We determine how much we should invest into learning and what you need to do. And it is a lot. And it is a lot because as an NP, Most all of us are paid on production. We got to be fast. Speed. Well, maybe a better word is efficiency is super, super important in most all NP roles. There are some where it's maybe less so. But particularly in my world in critical care, in ER as well, in primary care for sure, any kind of clinic, because they are literally, they have a panel of 15 to maybe 30 patients and they are just rolling through it. Taking time to stop and talk through your teaching, like even just speaking out loud. Okay, this patient I just saw, this is what I'm thinking and this is why I'm thinking it. That's not great teaching. That's kind of just passively hearing things. Really good teaching is, okay, you see this patient, you do this. What are you thinking? What is your plan? Well, that takes probably 4 times as long as for me to just do it. So being an NP preceptor is a huge commitment of time, mental energy, finances. Often because we get paid on productivity or bonuses, we get paid less because we're working slower. There's a lot that we put into this as NP preceptors that I don't think NP students truly, truly understand. So if I'm putting all of that into you, I expect more than the bare minimum from you. I expect that when you're there, I am your world. Tests don't exist, quizzes don't exist. Family's important. Okay, yes. But whatever it is in your outside life is not there right now. We are here to develop your education. And that means you need to give as much as I give. And this is the part that I think enough students don't exhibit well, that I have to talk about it. So engagement, that is one of the fundamental pieces of a fabulous nurse practitioner student in clinical engagement. And engagement is illustrated through, hold on, let me go through all the pillars here. The pillars. Illustrating passion, number 1. So a lot of people do critical care because it is required rotation, or they happen to get a preceptor there, but you can tell it's not something they want to do. So like I talked about in the beginning, they tend to just like kind of shut down. They tend to do other things. They tend to avoid hard stuff. And it shows, and here's what I want to talk about why it's important. So say you are an acute care NP and like maybe you haven't worked in ICU. Your goal is not to be in an ICU. That is not for you. So you're busy that semester. You got to put in 160 hours with a critical care team, but it's overwhelming for you. You don't like it. You have no desire to do it. So you're not going to put a lot into it, right? Because you're pulled in so many directions because you're not passionate about it. But here's the thing. Healthcare is a small world. So even if you don't love it and it shows and you put in the bare minimum or you're not doing even the standard, we all talk. So this is basically a working interview. That's what this is. This is a working interview. People are assessing what you will be like as an NP, what your education and skill level already is coming into it, how much training you would need, what you would be like as a coworker. And if you're the kind of person who's like checked out, guess what? If you go to apply for that nephrology job, which you do want, and that nephrologist calls me and says, hey, what do you think about this person? I'm like, well, they were not a great student. You're shooting yourself in the foot. So no matter what rotation you're doing, you walk in like it is the only thing you want to do. You fake it a little bit, but not necessarily faking it. Like truly just commit to engaging in it, because who knows, number 1, if you will like it. Who knows, number 2, if they will come with a fabulous offer for you and you're like, you know what, I could do this for a couple of years. This is great money. Or they will recommend you to a nephrology team. Like you go into it with your A game every single time, even if it's not what you want to do. And this is something that I find people don't consistently do. Some people do it very, very well. The best NP students do it very, very well. The others, they don't. So in that part of engagement, illustrating your passion is key. Okay, one thing I did want to add on to that piece of that illustrating passion. There are some people who are just by nature very shy, quiet, reserved, shy. That's perfectly fine. I think a little bit that makes it challenging for this person is that as the person looking at you and talking to you, it comes across a little differently. It may not always be clear that you're just shy or nervous. It may come across as someone who doesn't care or is not engaged. So I think it's super duper important, and this will go back to communication in a little bit, that when you start your rotation, if that's the case, if you're if you're an observer, if you're more of a quiet person, if you're super intimidated and don't want to speak, you need to communicate that from the get-go with your preceptor. Hey, listen, I'm super nervous to do this critical care rotation. I've not worked in an ICU. If I'm quiet, it's because I'm a little bit overwhelmed or I don't know what to say. It's not because I'm not interested. I'd love for you to point me in the direction of what I can do better or say better, whatever. Just setting that expectation for who you are as a person and your best learning style will alleviate a lot of misunderstandings. And then the second part of showing engagement is focusing on clinicals, which I'm kind of going out of order, aren't I? Very ADD today. When we're in our 12-hour shift together, when we're talking about something, I want to see that you're interested in it. I want to see that you're asking relevant questions. I want to see that during our downtime, after you finish your typhon or you finish your note, that you're not studying for your quiz, but you are looking on up to date at whatever it was that we talked about, that you are expanding your studies to really truly get a handle on what it is you saw and did that day, to really cement that learning. Because let's be real, the learning that happens in NP school truly happens in clinicals. You'll get the foundation. It's didactic, right? You'll get the foundation in the classroom, but it won't cement there until you see it in real life. So you really, really need to focus on what you're learning in your rotation. And I want to pause for a minute and see what our comments are saying. Mr. Midwife, you worked full-time and did full-time school? Holy mackerel. And you went to Alaska? What? I guess, you know what? It probably is in the OBGYN world. It probably is hard to find preceptors. Holy mackerel. That's impressive. Yeah, typhon. We're all traumatized by typhon. Yeah, Scott says he won't meet his professors until commencement. I think that's the norm. Honestly, even at state schools, that is a lot of the case. Most people are in hybrid. I don't really know many programs that are all in person. Most of them are hybrid. So what I find is that some online doesn't mean bad. It truly doesn't. Some people do it really well and some schools do it piss poor. It depends on how much access you have to your professors and the message they're sharing and how the lectures are given and who's giving them and all these kind of factors. But I think sometimes maybe I worry that I come across as being completely down on online programs. That's not the case at all. I think there are plenty of great online programs. I've just seen clinical preceptors. Some are super great. Like when I get a new student with me, the preceptor is going to send me the paperwork early. They're going to be engaged. They're going to be communicating with me throughout. But for the most part, it's only 1 or 2 times that we're going to talk. Yeah, so it's just me and you. It's me and you, buddy. There's not a lot of teacher in the middle. Yeah, Mr. Midwife says, I expect you to be better on week 5 than you are. Right, because it's growth, right? That's what we're looking for is growth. I don't expect you at the end of a critical care rotation to be a competent nurse practitioner in the ICU at all. But do you know more when you ended than when you started? That's the key. And learning how to learn how to work through a patient. That's the foundation of it. How do you work a patient up? How do you present a patient? How do you write a note on a patient? Where do you go to find your resources? That's really what we're trying to teach, because there's no way in 160 hours you're gonna come out feeling competent. You're just not. Scott said, bust through the clinic door, storage on his bag, where are the patients? I know I'm sure you will be an amazing student. I have no doubts about that at all. Right. Is there progress? Exactly. Okay. So, okay. When I was talking about engagement and focusing on clinicals, I wanted to share a story, and this is, I have to share my experiences because that's what I know in life, but this is not trying to toot my own horn and brag. But what I said earlier, that NP clinical rotations are a working interview. I cannot stress that enough. This is their opportunity to see if they want to hire you and or recommend you to someone else. Most NP jobs are filled from within. They're not posted online. They are, we scout people when they come through. We recommend them to other services. We try and find I always try and find NP students with me. I always try and help them find a job. So it's super key that you're on your A game. And to give you an example of this, when I was a student, I was very blessed. I had access to a lot of great rotations. I got to pick where I wanted to go. I approached every single rotation. Well, first of all, I chose rotations that were outside what I've experienced so far. I felt like this is my opportunity to see what I like. This is my opportunity to get some time with specialties that I have no experience with that will add to my practice as an NP. And at the time, I really thought I wanted to go in palliative care. So I did, and oh my gosh, I did the most amazing rotation through an oncology group at Emory, inpatient, outpatient, multiple different types of cancer. Such a great rotation. I did that. I did a neuro ICU. I did a regular ICU. I did heart failure. What else did I do? Oh my gosh, they're all running together now. But every single one that I approached, I did a liver transplant. Like, I've never worked with a transplant patient in my life. I had minimal interaction with like truly sick cirrhotics, which is clearly, I talk about cirrhosis a lot because it was foundational for me. But I put myself outside my comfort zone so that I could expand my base. But having done that, I was super nervous going into this stuff. Like oncology, I have no idea about any chemotherapy regimens or what they are, what they do, nothing. Very overwhelming to me, particularly because at Emory, so for example, when I did the outpatient clinic rotations, each solid organ has its own hallway. So you were only doing lung that day, and you were only doing colon that day, and you were only like one. So that was kind of cool because I could focus my energies. But here's what I would do. Like, before I did my GI clinic oncology rotation, I spent an hour. It wasn't long, maybe an hour the night before, searching YouTube for, common chemotherapy regimens for colon cancer. Like, when do you do surgery and when do you start chemo? And what are the common regimens? And so I knew that FOLFOX and FOLFIRI were common regimens. I wrote down what the drugs were. Had I ever heard of them? No. Did I know all the side effects for them? A little bit, because I wrote them down, but I didn't know it, have no experience with this, right? But I did 2 days with that team. And oh my gosh, at the end of the first day, actually, I think it was halfway through the first day, my preceptor for that day pulled me aside, and she, like, literally, I saw a couple patients, talked to her about it. I was like, oh, yeah. So she pulls me aside. I thought I was in trouble. She pulls me to a private room. She said, okay, can I ask you some questions about colon cancer? And I was like, oh God. I mean, like, we were completely alone, and she was quizzing me, and I was like, oh God. I was like, is it okay if I use notes? And she was like, you have notes? And I said, mm-hmm. So I pulled them out. She asked me some things. And I was like, okay, I think that's a nib. I think it works this way, but I'm not entirely sure. And she's like, do you know what we're looking for in regards to side effects? And I was like, I mean, I wrote it down if you want me to look at my notes. So we went through it, and I thought I was doing like really poorly. Like, here I am failing, At the end of it, she said, you are the only student I've ever had who came in with notes. You are the only student I've ever had. And they gave me a verbal job offer. They didn't have a job open, but they knew in the melanoma clinic on that hallway, one of the NPs was going to be semi-retiring the next year. So there was no position open, but they knew she was going to be going to a half FTE. So they gave me a verbal offer, and they were like, we're going to create a position, and then we'll segue for a year when she goes out, and you'll take over. So we'll just have an extra FTE. So they made a job for me just because I spent an hour the night before my rotation looking things up that I didn't know. Was I a competent GI cancer NP? Heck no, I had no idea what I was doing, but I showed engagement. I showed an interest in it beyond just showing up, checking off a box, seeing some people, like just trying to learn it. Am I fascinated by GI cancer? No, not at all. But it's an opportunity to learn something you don't know, right? And I talk about this because it seems like common sense, because I'm sure the people that are watching this are the kind of people who are doing that. But a majority of NP students are not. The majority of them are not. I promise you it. I promise you. I know you don't know what your cohort is doing because you don't see what they're doing when you're in your, you know what you're doing. They're not doing it. No, they're not doing it. Okay, let me take a minute and do a little bit of foundational stuff here. Where are we at? 29 minutes. I am talker some today. I don't know. Got lots to say, I guess. I think it's because I slept so good. I don't know how I slept because there are people in our basement and they're making a lot of noise. It's weird. My body's super weird. Like, I typically can't sleep in the best of circumstances, but everything going on, weird. You know what? Don't look a gift horse in the mouth. It is what it is. I'll take it. Scott said, I might be jumping ahead, but what's the difference between RN clinicals and NP clinicals? Okay. So the biggest thing is like what I already talked about, in that there's less oversight. As an NP student, you're kind of on your own. You are master's or doctoral level students, so they treat you as such. You're an adult, you know. Most everybody. There's not a lot of people that are doing direct entry programs, but there are some. Anyways, most of them have, you know, they're a little bit older, they're a little bit more mature, and there's just less like faculty. So you're kind of on your own. They give you the expectations and they say, hey, set it up with your preceptor, do your best. So it's very, very different than as an RN, where there's so many rules and like, okay, when you walk in the room, I'm going to show my age here, but I remember the nurse I was with told me I could administer the medications to the patient. She handed me a little like paper cup with pills in it. I walked in the room and I was so focused on I have to wash my hands as soon as I enter the room. I set the little cup of pills down on the like on the counter where the sink is, wash my hands, and then pick that up. And my faculty saw me do it and she failed me for the day because I set that down in a non-clean environment. Like that kind of BS, no. That's necessary when you have, you know, younger people who are, it's much more structured and stupid, honestly, as an RN as it is an NP. The other thing that's different, and they just sat on the thing, but it wasn't clean, I guess. Oh, whatever. I'm like, lucky it didn't fall on the floor. I picked up and handed it to him. Who's got time to go get another pill? You know, that kind of stupid stuff doesn't exist. So it's much more independent. It's kind of like you have probably already found that your classroom is very independent. Like they don't test you from chapter 3, paragraph 2. Did you read it? They just want to know that you've mastered the content, however you can master it. Very, very independent. The other thing that I think is, I don't know if this is, yeah, I guess so one of the fundamental problems that NP students struggle with is making that leap from being a bedside provider to being the provider. So wait a minute, I think I talk about this. I do. I'll come to this in a minute. We'll talk about this in just a minute. Okay, let me finish just a little bit on the engagement section. The third pillar is going above and beyond. So this, what I'm talking about in this is the student who, like, say we're talking about, I don't know, we're talking about echoes. We're talking about echocardiograms. And we're talking about all the different factors you're going to look at on an echo. And you say, what's a TAPSE? I don't know what a TAPSE is. And I say, and it's rare, but I will sometimes do this where I say, tell you what, you go look it up and come back and teach me. Now, if you don't have time to do it that day, it's not a big deal. We're busy. I get it. But if you don't come back the next time we're together and say, hey, can we talk about TAPSE? I'm going to notice, because it's rare that people do it. They may have actually done it in reality, but they failed to carry through with that second part of coming back and saying, hey, I read about it. Here's what I think it means. Clarify about it. That is very unique, very, very unique. So people who are doing stuff even beyond the shift that they're there, and or what I will see in practice is that, like, we get a lot of NP students who are also nurses at our facility. They will kind of step in, like when things get busy. Hey, listen, I know I'm assigned these 2 patients. Would you like me to help you out by going, to this rapid and just eyeballing this person before you get down there? Would you like me to, just kind of doing a little bit more? Now, obviously, This is going to be limited by your comfort level, your experience, how well you know the facility. So you may not necessarily have a lot of opportunities to do that, but if you do, if it's something that you're comfortable with that will help your preceptor, that is huge and that is rare. One example that I did for this is when I was in the liver transplant unit rotation. They were super busy and they were called to see an ER patient, and my preceptor was super busy. I was like, do you want me to go down and eyeball him first and just kind of get a feel for what's going on with him? And she was like, so relieved. They also offered me a job, by the way. And did I have a lot to offer? No. But I could go down, see that the patient was not in imminent distress. He was hemodynamically stable. He was on 2 liters nasal cannula. The labs weren't back yet, but this is what he looked like. And did he need to come to the transplant unit? Maybe, maybe not. He could probably be discharged. So it helped her a whole lot in getting that like first steps done. And also, here's the other thing behind the scenes. When a preceptor's super busy and they're doing their own task, but also stopping to talk to you, sometimes it's hard if there's not a task that you're working on, because I feel like I need to be talking to you. I feel like I need to be teaching you, engaged with you all the time. And yet it's limiting me from doing my work. So if there's something that I can find for you to do that will help your learning experience while keeping you kind of busy so I can work on mine, that's great. So if you offer that to me, that's even better. That's way above and beyond. Very, very few people have ever done this for me, but the ones that do, I'm like, let's hire him. Because it also shows that you're not too scared to do things that are scary. You got that bravery piece of things. You're an excellent teammate because you recognize when things are hitting the fan and you're willing to help and do what you can. So those are both key points on somebody that I want to be a coworker for me. And then the last point on engagement is never ask to shadow. And I say this because we've had NP students who've done it. We've had NP students who have come in, not one of mine, because that would be a big problem for me. But one of my coworkers had a student who came in. She was very overwhelmed. She asked if she could shadow for the first week or so. And then beyond that, when my coworker asked her to do things, she would say, I'm just not comfortable with that. And she let her. I would have failed her. Because you're going to go into some rotations, Scott, you probably will see this as well, where you're just not with a great preceptor. You're with someone who's busy, they're overwhelmed, they kind of see you as a nuisance. It's just the reality of the world, okay? You're going to experience that. Hopefully not much, but you will. And so those preceptors are the ones that say, hey, just watch me. Just hang out here and watch me. If you have any questions, ask later. That's, while you are getting something out of it, you're getting a little bit of passive learning. It's not going to stick well because you're not the one doing it. You need to be the one seeing the patients, doing the exam, making the treatment plan, writing the prescription. You need to be doing it in order to learn it. You need to write the notes. So definitely don't expect or ask to shadow. And if you get into that rotation with that preceptor, I had one where she said, students cannot put notes in the chart for us, so you can't write notes. And I was like, well, what if I have access, I can log in and see labs and everything. What if I wrote my note on paper? Would you be okay, even if you don't have time today, just evaluating it and getting back with me to make sure I'm on the right page? And she loved that. And we did. Granted, she was also the one that told me I could not spend 6 hours on a note. But yeah, she was interesting. Yeah. She told me I couldn't spend 6 hours on a note, which is what I was doing. And that I needed more than 3 problems for somebody in the ICU. She was right. She was right on all accounts. She was not my favorite preceptor, but sometimes tough love is good love. My issue is that you didn't take the pills out of the package yourself. So how did you know? Well, yeah, that's probably true. I probably would have. That's true. She probably would have failed me had she known that. Very good point. This was before the days of like having things packaged and scanning. This is a while ago, y'all. While ago. This is also a time when I'd be like, okay, I don't know what metoprolol is. I don't know what that one is. I don't know what that one is. And that's the worst when you're like new and you don't know what you're doing. And your patient's like, what is the blue one? I'm like, I don't know. What's it for? I don't know. may or may not have done that. So I wonder I passed nursing school. Okay, so that's the engagement piece of things. Let's go back to the beginning where I talk about communication, because communication is the key to everything in life, isn't it? Watch one, do one, teach one. Yeah, it is absolutely reasonable to go in on day one and shadow. Absolutely, because you don't even know what their workflow is like, the type of patients that they're seeing. Absolutely. The very first NP rotation I have, it wasn't like that. It was heart failure. I only had a week with her. And day one, she's like, all right, go see these 3 people. I was like, and do what? and do what? She's like, just go see them. Come back and tell me what you think. And I was like, oh my God. So I totally reverted to nursing. I put my white coat on. I totally reverted to nursing. But you'd be amazed. You'd be amazed once you get in there and start doing it, how much your nursing experience and background will really guide you. Because a lot of this stuff you were already thinking as a nurse. Heart failure, right? You go in, they've got 4+ pitting edema, they've got JVD and crackles, and you're like, I think she should be diuresed. I don't know. And you say it quietly with trepidation. She's like, yeah, that's probably a good call. So sometimes it's not. We make it way more complicated than it really is, just because it's new and all that kind of thing. But yes, I think it's perfectly reasonable to go in on a day one, shadow, day 2, ask to see people. It's going to be very overwhelming, and you're going to feel way outside your comfort zone. It's supposed to feel that way. It's supposed to feel that way. It sucks. Everything sucks. It's fun, kinda, but it also sucks. Nobody likes to be in that place of being overwhelmed. And it's way. So as a nurse, you remember how that felt? Okay, multiply that by like 10, factor of 10. As a provider, the burden of ownership of someone's life, making an accurate diagnosis, making a solid treatment plan to get this patient where they need to be, whether it's better or not, is huge. I cannot express it enough. The burden is huge. And you feel it even as a student, right? Me solving this mystery in the right way is truly life and death. And I believe that whether you are in primary care clinic or dealing with someone who's acutely dying, this is a person's health that will affect everything else. So even small things have impact. The first order I ever placed as a new grad NP was for Tylenol. Do you know how long it took me to put that order in? Because I'm like, okay, I'm still, like, I know what Tylenol is. I'm still looking at every single side effect of Tylenol. I'm looking at every single lab this person has. Like, what are the possible interactions or complications I can cause by giving this person Tylenol? Because the burden is huge and so underestimated by new grads and students. So underestimated. Okay. So communication is key. Yes. And it kind of goes back to this, there's no middleman between us. So it's you and me. So we really need to communicate our expectations on both sides, from the get-go. I always start with NP students, like, what's your background, because that tells me kind of where you're at and what you can handle from the get-go. So what's your background level? How long have you been doing this for? Where are you at in your training? Is this your first rotation or your last? Because there's a big difference between those. How many patients have you been seeing? How comfortable are you writing notes? Like, all of these things I'm going to ask you. But if you can verbalize it to me from the get-go, again, brownie points, because you're giving me stuff that I'm not having to pull out of you. So showing up on day one and saying, this is my first rotation. I've never written a note before. I would like to work on X, Y, and Z this rotation. Oh my gosh. Nobody does that. That would be amazing. Yeah, so that's what I was talking. Okay, so what I wrote was, what I've learned is that the best students know themselves very well and are able to verbalize to me their needs. Key. I've only had a handful of people who've been able to do that. And learning style, this piggybacks on this. The best student I ever had told me very early on, Brianna, I process information that I see and that I hear by repeating it to myself. And if it's okay with you, I'd like to repeat it to you. So I'm a bit of a repeater. So if it gets annoying, please let me know. If it's disruptive, please let me know. And it's not that I'm questioning you. It's just that I'm trying to process the information and make sure that I received it in the right way. I was like, blown away. Like, oh my God, okay, yeah. And she did the whole time that we were together for a year. The whole time she did that. And she did less and less of it as we went along because she was starting to get it. But that a good preceptor is adaptable. They're able to tailor their teaching style to what works for you. It makes for a happier relationship with both of us. If I know that you learn by reading, let's spend some time reading. If we're going to talk about ABGs, let's dedicate an hour of the day to you reading. And these are the places I recommend you go on reading on ABGs. If you learn by writing notes, let's spend some more time writing notes. If you learn by being in the room and by rounding, let's round with all the residents and see how they present and hear all their stories of their patients. It's just better for you. It's better for me. But sometimes it's hard for me to tease that out of students because I think they're either nervous or they're shy or they're not engaged at all. So getting to feel for like what works for this person sometimes takes a couple weeks, and we've lost those weeks. So if you can show up already like having spent some time like introspective and really trying to understand yourself well and be able to communicate to your preceptor your best learning style, your heads and tails. I don't know if that's the right euphemism. You are way ahead of your competition, way ahead. Feedback. Okay. Oh, goodness. I want to think how much I really want to share on here. I'll just leave it generic. If you're the kind of person who struggles with hearing feedback, you're going to have a hard time in clinicals because it is a constant, daily, hourly, sometimes minute reminder of what you don't know and what you're doing poorly and what you need to still learn. And the overwhelm just grows and grows and grows. The reason people are giving you feedback is to help you grow, but it can be hard to hear. My experience as a student, I was at an academic center mostly, which is good because even the attendings enjoy teaching and they take ownership even of NPs. So they will spend time pimping you out. So you will have to present during rounds in front of 9 nurses and all the adjunct faculty and the residents and the attendings and your NP preceptors and friends. There'll be 20 people standing there staring at you, and you will say something wrong and dumb. And then that sometimes that attending will take you down a rabbit hole. Okay, I remember one asked me, I think he was asking me a question on what the treatment for C. diff was, but that wasn't how he worded it. And in my mind, I heard MRSA. So I was talking about IV Vanc. And he said, nope, wrong. So then he took me down every single ID pathway there is. I knew almost none of it. I was humiliated. And the nurses in the back were like raising their hand like, oh, let me answer. And I was like, oh my God, I hate all of you. There were a lot of days I left in tears because I was so embarrassed at how much I did not know. But if you look at that, if you reformat your thinking about this as, okay, these people care so much about my education that they're willing to put me through the ringer to get me to their level. Try and think of it that way, and it's less traumatizing, slightly less traumatizing. I have had some students in the past that I don't do that. I don't pimp people out. I mean, I am tough though. I'm a tough preceptor because I care. But some people don't receive feedback well. And NP students who don't do well are the ones who are argumentative, the ones who shut down, the ones who really struggle with hearing feedback. Some of this comes down to one of two things. Either you're totally overwhelmed and have no idea what you're doing and you're embarrassed, or you are egotistical. And I have had some do this. They come in with a lot of years of experience. They maybe worked in this place where we're at, so they feel like they know a lot already. And they come in with some ego, and they come in with the, I've been a nurse for 20 years. You're a little bit younger than me. And you're constantly telling me all day long what I'm doing wrong and how you would alter things. So they respond by being argumentative. And I'm talking excessively. I'm not talking about like, okay, so you don't agree with PO Vanc. What would you do instead? I'm talking well, I would never do this. I've seen this done 5 times. Like, trust me, there are NP students like that. It is, when it's a daily thing, we're not ever going to hire you. We're just not. You come across as a very argumentative and difficult person to work with because you're uncomfortable with receiving information that you felt like you didn't know, or that your ego is being threatened. Your ego is a problem. And some NP students have this. Not many, but some. They are the hardest students to have. Okay. Hey, 802 Merce, glad you're here. Welcome. We are talking about qualities of the best NP students that I've ever had. And to talk about that, we have to talk about the things I don't like. Scott said, presenting in front of 20 people kind of makes you think public speaking should be, for sure. I mean, you honestly just know going into it, you are going to be embarrassed. And so then it's like, maybe I'll just like take what I can from here and never work here so that people don't remember me. It's hard. I'm telling you, I left clinicals in tears so many times because I was so overwhelmed and I felt like such a dummy. But those are the things I still remember to this day. There is, a yin to the yang in most things in life. Oh, well, that was number 4. Put the ego aside. I just segued right into that. Okay, so the last tier and the longest tier is professionalism. This is where the stories get interesting. This is where we meet some people that you're like, they did what? Yeah, we've had some students that, I'll just say it's entertaining. People are interesting. We're all different, right? We all bring a different set of skills to the table. We all bring a different level of emotional maturity to the table. Some people handle this pressure differently than others. I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting, friends. Most people handle this pretty darn well, but the ones that don't, man, it is like very dramatic. So when my friend Mitzi and I were recording this video, we kind of had a good time. We're like, okay, what can we say publicly and can't we say? So a lot of this, you're going to be like, well, yeah, obviously I wouldn't do that. But I mean, we're saying it because we've experienced it. And this is what your cohort are doing. So if you're not doing these things, you're way ahead of the game. So professionalism. Okay. Be on time. Okay. Honestly, why do I even have to say it, right? Why do I even have to say it? Because in reality, it happens. You have some students who just are routinely late. I'm not talking about like you got stuck in traffic once or twice. I'm talking about most every shift, they're rolling in 10, 15 minutes late. And here's why it's a problem. And this is not, you might think this is just an inpatient or a critical care thing. It's not, okay? The reason it's really bad in an inpatient or any kind of setting where it is a shift work, where there's a night shift and a day shift flipping off, you got to take report from someone, just like when you were a nurse. So just like when you were a nurse, if you're not there for report, somebody else is staying late, or like they're not waiting on you, right? Because you're a student, but you've missed the entire sign out. You missed all the relevant history about what happened overnight and what you need to do during the day. You've missed 50% of what you need to start your day. So that 10 minutes is critical, absolutely critical for any kind of shift work. But here's my argument for why, even in non-shift work, even if you're doing like an ID rotation and your preceptor works like 8 to 5, or you're going to clinic and you're seeing a different set of patients every day. And I'm talking about routinely, I'm talking about once a week, multiple times a week. This is what I'm talking about. This is the patient I'm talking about. You are telling the world that you can't get to work on time. It's a working interview, y'all. It is a working interview. The first time someone contacts that clinic preceptor and says, hey, how was the student? Well, he was a great student, but he was late a lot. They're not going to hire you. They're just not going to hire you, period, because that speaks to how you are in life. And that's how you will be as an NP. Nobody wants a coworker who's late every day, period. Also, if you're doing, so like I'll use the clinic example. I think I forgot to do this. Maybe all over. I did. Totally did. I'm all over the place today. I think I have a lot of thoughts. Got like pressured speech. I had can I say that? Let's just say recently we had a patient overdose come in, and the overdosed medications they talked about were all downers. And I walked in the room, and this patient had pressured speech. You're like, ah! And I was like, they didn't take downers. They took some kind of uppers. Pressured speech, flight of ideas, exactly. Stream of consciousness. My friend Brooke calls it spider webbing. We do this. Have y'all heard of Marco Polo? It's a video chat app. It's like texting except with videos. I'm in a group one with some of my college best friends, and there's like 7 of us. So every day there's like sometimes hours of videos, but it's great to keep up with people. But she's always like, when she does her videos, they're very long, and she's like, she talks about this, and then she talks about that, and then she talks about this. She's spider webbing again. I said, oh, that's what it's called. That's what I'm doing. Okay. So being on time, we talked about that period. You don't really need me to harp on that because you guys aren't the kind of people who aren't on time, but there are a lot of them. Okay, avoiding excessive schedule switches or call outs. This is why it's a problem. For me in particular, I rotate between several different sites, different hospitals, different units. I am behind the scenes adapting trying to influence where I will be during that shift that we're scheduled to work together so that you can have the best experience. And sometimes it is at a personal expense to me or to the team. So if I've done all that and then you don't show up, or you let me know that morning you can't come, let me just tell you, it's bad. It's not good, y'all. So the best students, they give me their dates well in advance, like a month in advance. It's not the week before, which many, many people do. If you can give me your schedule a month in advance of when you plan to be with me, and try to limit how many times you switch out or say, hey, I can't come this day. Can I come this day instead? I'm not, and then that does happen. So it's not, I'm talking excess, y'all, to excess. You just look more professional. You're more respectable. You come across as someone who's trustworthy, who's someone who's organized, who's someone who's planning ahead. Even though, again, you're pulled in a million different directions and you have a test that springs up at the last second, you need to move this to that. You're the kind of person who can handle that kind of stress and still be organized and on time and follow through with your commitments. So I say it because it happens. I know none of y'all are doing that, but it happens. Okay, this is another one that's interesting. Okay, I've only, maybe twice, this has been a problem. Preceptor shopping. What I mean by this is the person who, what am I going to put in the middle? Hold on, let me take a second and figure out what's going in the middle here. I did dark there, so I guess I got to go dark. I don't have a color that's working here. Yeah, this one, this will work. I tend to see this in people who work at the organization where I work. Like they, because of the excessive schedule shifts and switches, our schedules aren't aligned. And so what they do is they walk around to every team member that I work with and ask them if they can come with them on a certain day, including the physicians. And there's a whole reason why. That's a whole nother topic about why I don't want you to be with a physician. But there's also probably some things you don't realize behind the scenes about why that person you're asking is not a good fit for you, either on their end or your end. So don't do that. That's not professional. If we're having an issue scheduling things, let's talk about it. Again, let's go back to that communication thing. Let me know in advance that you're having an issue and we'll sort it out. I promise you, we'll sort it out. But to just walk amongst my peers and say, hey, can I do a rotation with you? Can I spend some hours with you? No. We have certain things that we need to accomplish when you're with me. And if you strongly, you have a good desire to work with a certain provider because they're great, let me know. I'll help you set it up. I have no problems with that. But don't just do it on your own. It's just not professional. I mean, would you go to your place of employment and step outside the bounds like that? Honestly, y'all, it amazes me what students do, because obviously all I knew was what I did as a student, and I was kind of surprised that most people didn't do more. It was very surprising to me when I started precepting people. Maybe this color. Okay, scope. All right, this goes both ways. What is your role in what you're doing? You are an NP student. You are not the nurse, okay? You are not the bedside nurse. You are not the staff nurse at that hospital. You are also, conversely, not the NP. You are the NP trainee, which is your role, and you need to stick to that role. What I mean by that is this, on both ends of that spectrum. So if you are a nurse, and whether this is your home hospital or not, and you feel comfortable with the population of people that you're seeing and what needs to be done for the patient, and you kind of go, before we've had a chance to talk about your treatment plan and what you want to do for a patient, you're giving orders to the nurses. It's not okay. Not okay. If you are, say, you're familiar with consultants at this organization, and there was some hints about maybe we should call nephrology, and you walk up to a nephrologist and say, hey, what do you think about blah, blah, blah? That's not your place either, because there may have been some strategy that you weren't aware of. Like, we got to talk about things before you just do them. That is one thing that I see sometimes, or I will see nurses who are, so they've been an ICU nurse for a billion years, and they're very, very, very good at their job. And they're working as an NP student with nurses who are very green and who aren't yet very good at their job. And they will either say things that are maybe bordering on rude, and or pushing the nurses. Hey, can you get that? Go ahead and get that IV. Can you? That's not nice, friend. It's not nice. And I get that you're trying to be an advocate for the patient, but that's sort of stepping outside the bounds of what's professional. Now, the flip side of that is the patient, is the nurse who, or the NP student who is so nervous, overwhelmed, overloaded that they don't level up to the scope they're supposed to be doing, which is working as a provider. And I alluded to this in the beginning, and this is where, as a default, you go back to what you know. So you go back to being the bedside nurse. So say, typically what I'll do is, once we've had some time to work together, we've been together for a week or so, I'm going to give you 2 patients. These are your patients. I expect that you are going to go evaluate these patients independent of me, because you've already seen how I evaluate people, how I do exams. I anticipate that you are going to look up the labs, do the workup independently of me, and then we're going to come together. Because otherwise, you're just listening to me talk about what my plan is and what are you getting from that. So if I ask you to independently go examine 2 people, and it's been 4 hours, and you've done the exam, but you have no plan ready, you have nothing ready to go, and then I get to the root of what's taking you so long, like why is this delayed so much? And I find out that you've been doing nursing tasks. You spent time talking with the patient. You helped the nurse turn the patient. You were watching someone do a procedure and cleaned up after them. It's defaulting to what you know, because you walked into a room in a patient with 20 drips and you have no idea how to verbalize what the problem is, make a diagnosis, and make a treatment plan. So you're nervous, or you're unable to do it. So you default to doing nothing, basically. And we've wasted your day. So you're not there as the nurse. I appreciate trying to be a team player. Today's the dropsies day. Hold on. But you have to balance it out. You can't spend the majority of your day doing nursing tasks because you're hesitant to do NP tasks. If that's the case, let's go back to communicating. Day one, we struggle. You've got 2 patients. It's all you've done all day long. You struggle to come up with anything. And at the end of the day, we talk through it, and I see that you've got like 2 bullet points and nothing else. What happened here? What's the root of the issue? Just let me know. I was super overwhelmed. The patients you gave me were way harder than what I was expecting. Here's where I struggled with. And, maybe tomorrow I should just do 1, or maybe tomorrow I should focus on something different. So I ended up kind of getting pulled into things. Just communicate. Let's just communicate what the issues are. But remember, you're not there as the nurse anymore. This is something that I find most NP students struggle with more than anything else, is that transition from being the nurse, which is what you know and what you're comfortable with, to being the provider, which is not what you're comfortable with. So it's very, very hard to make that leap. Very hard to make that leap. I will also say, and I didn't really put this in the blog, but now it's coming to me. One of the things that makes for a fabulous NP student, and this is typically someone who's nearing the end, they're close to graduation, they've been spending a lot of hours in rotations, and they know what it's like working as an NP, is the NP who can present. Now, working in inpatient setting in ICU, so bear that in mind. But when you present a patient, you are verbalizing what you've diagnosed the patient with, like the pertinence that you see and how you came to that diagnosis. You're discussing your treatment options and what you would do for that day. Now, NPs who are green present like nurses, head to toe. Here's what I'm seeing. This is a patient who's on these drips. He's doing this neurologically. Pulmonary wise, he's on the vent and he's had some hypoxia. Instead of giving me medical diagnoses, use medical words because you are a medical provider now. So head to toe would be that patient who's sedated on medications. You wouldn't present that way. You would say, this patient has metabolic encephalopathy. We think it is related to his high ammonia level because his liver's failing, plus he's septic. He is intubated and therefore requiring heavy sedation because he's got agitated delirium. And so he's on Precedex and whatever. And we have not done a spontaneous breathing trial today because he's been, so every time we reduce the sedation, his heart rate goes very high. Okay, that was a medical diagnosis. You presented the pertinent facts to help support what your plan is, and then you would follow it up with what the treatment options would be. You know, our plan today is let's bring the ammonia level down, let's try and, you know, target what's causing the delirium, and then do an SBT tomorrow. Then you'd go on to the lungs and you'd say, okay, instead of what did I say? This patient's on the vent, they're hypoxic. You would say this patient has hypoxemic respiratory failure. I think it is related to pneumonia. Here's the x-ray. He's got a right base infiltrate. He has cultures that are pending. He is on cefepime and vanc. Like, that's medical, right? Nurses are very detail oriented, very heavily focused on assessment. It's all the assessment pieces of it. There's not as much of the plan piece of it. You have to make that leap in putting medical words to what you're seeing in the room. If you walk in the room and there are 5 drips, okay, the medical term is not hypotension. The medical term is shock. This person has evidence of end organ failure because of renal failure and this, that, and the other, and they're on 4 pressors. Okay, what kind of shock is it? Because this is how you get to your treatment plan, right? This is how we narrow it down. We go from this patient is hypotensive on a bunch of drips to this patient has shock. I think it is probably septic shock. Okay, how do we treat septic shock? We give them volume if they need it, if they're dry. We get to the root of what the source is, like really hone in on the source, the diagnosis, and put them on the right antibiotics. That's how you treat. That's how you take a patient who's overwhelming with a bunch of drips and drill it down to what the problem is and what you need to do by getting a medical name for it, getting a diagnosis. Versus, you know, NP students, even experienced ICU nurses walk in the room and go, well, he's super sick. He's super sick. He looks really bad and he's on a bunch of drips. Okay, what is the medical problem? Because a super sick patient on a bunch of drips, you just get overwhelmed and go, I don't know what I need to do to make him better. I don't know how to make him better. This is getting bad. Drill it down to what the diagnosis is so that you can make an appropriate treatment plan. This is the leap from being a bedside provider to being an NP. And this takes a long period of time. I don't typically see this until people are in their final rotation. We work on it from the beginning, but usually it's not till the end that they're doing this routinely. Yes, the transition is so hard. I cannot tell you how hard it is. And it doesn't end when you graduate. It just starts. As a new grad NP, it's going to take you 6 months to a year or more, depending on what your specialty is. It's overwhelming. But it is incredibly rewarding when you get to that point. Very rewarding profession. Okay, we talked about, I really think that's it, y'all. Yeah, that's all I got. That is all I got. I did at the end talk about, I shared basically the best student I ever had. I can tell you her name is Nikki. I have interviewed her on my channel before. She's the one I'm telling you I was with for a year. And in part, that's part of why I think we had such a good relationship, because we spent so much time together. But really and truly, she exhibited all these pillars. She was engaged every single time that she came in. She was heavily focused on this. She told me from the get-go, this is what I want to do. And she exhibited that by going above and beyond. She was always studying. She was always asking relevant questions. She was communicating her needs. She's the one who told me that she learns best by repeating back. We made that work. She was probably, interesting, Nikki wouldn't mind me telling this because she's told this story, but she was a charge nurse in the cardiac ICU. I mean, a phenomenal one. Always asking, always wanting to know more, always desiring to understand what was wrong with the patient at the core, which is qualities of somebody who's going to make a great NP. Because you're already thinking through not just like, how do we get through the day, but how do we make this person better? And so I knew when she came in, she'd be great. She was a phenomenal charge nurse. She was probably one of the most scared students I've ever had because she has such a high standard for herself that she was terrified that she was not going to do a good job. And while I don't think that's necessarily a great trait, what it does show is it shows passion. It shows a high standard for yourself, a commitment to what it is that you're learning, and also a passion that this is, because she told me multiple times, I want to do critical care. And I said, Nikki, listen, we're in Georgia. There are just no critical care jobs. You know, if you really want to do it, you're going to have to consider moving or doing something else for a while. That girl, y'all, you should really watch her video. It's amazing. That girl, okay, this is what you need to do, Scott, if you're still here. While you're in your rotations, start collecting information. Start getting every single preceptor you have, ask them to write you a reference, every single one of them, and have them do it while you're with them so it's fresh on their mind. Get together any accolades you got as a nurse. Keep your case logs, any procedures, and create a portfolio. This is what she did. She created a portfolio. She had it printed out. She had multiples of them. And she networked the heck out of things. There was a job opening at a hospital near us in a different system. And she said, I really want this critical care job. I really want it. And I was like, then go for it. She got an interview. She was interviewing against 3 or 4, I believe, experienced NPs, and they gave her the job. No experience, brand new NP. They gave her the job over multiple experienced providers. And the reason is she showed so much passion, enthusiasm, engagement, had so much like proof that she was a great worker and a great learner that they were like, and she's committed to us. So we don't mind hiring new grads, but we want to know that you are, if we put in a year teaching you, you're going to stick with us and that you're going to pick it up quickly and that you're going to be a great coworker. And if you can show people that when you're in your rotation, I'm telling you, y'all, I had 5 out of 6 of the rotations I did, they gave me verbal offers. 2 gave me formal offers because you're the kind of person they want to work with. So it's just, honestly, the best students are brave. You know they're nervous. You know they have a high standard for themselves, but they get beyond it and they just get in there and do it. They're not afraid to tackle hard things. She was phenomenal. She got that job. I need to have her back on because she's been doing it now for about 6 months. So I'm curious how she's feeling. Like, has she gotten past her imposter syndrome phase yet? Probably not. It took me about a year probably before I got past that. But yeah, she was so excited. I was so happy for her. It was her total dream job in a very, very, very tight market for a very like narrow niche. It is absolutely possible. Just, show up with your A game. It's actually not that hard because I'm telling you guys, your cohort are not doing that. They are putting in the bare minimum. Okay, I think that's all I got on. I didn't think I would have enough to fill up even an hour about that, but I sure talked a lot about it. Pressured speech and all. Holy crap, an hour and 12 minutes. Okay. So next week will be something clinical. I don't know what it's going to be. I like to do things in the 11th hour. I don't know, but what I'm thinking is either something on, wait, I wrote it down a little while ago. Possibly on metabolic acidosis, like what that patient looks like, how to evaluate how bad it is, like what you need to do about it, versus, well, dang, I didn't write it down. I don't know. What's on my mind today is epinephrine because I was in a very interesting code recently, and I find that people can't keep epi straight. I couldn't keep it straight either. Like, which dose of epi is it? When do you give what? And what is it indicated for? When is the dose of epi that you're giving possibly going to actually kill your patient instead of make them better? Yep. But I already wrote a blog article about that. So I don't know. If you guys come up with something you want to learn about, let me know. I don't feel like every day I do this with y'all, I end up and I'm like, oh, it's good. It's fine. It's fine. It's night shift. Nobody looks. Merce 802 Merce says the program is pushing this hard, creating an e-portfolio. And oh, I love that. What are you comfortable sharing? What school you're at? That's great. I've not ever heard of anybody talking about that. And she's the only person I ever knew who did it. Another great school around me is Mercer, which is a private school, so it's not super cheap. And I think you got to kind of be local because it's truly hybrid. Like they want you to come into class a certain number of times. But I had a student from there last winter, sometime last year, who actually just landed a fellowship at Emory. I'm so proud of him. But anyways, his notes, his adjunct faculty for his acute care rotation required that they had to log their patients in Typhon or whatever, but he had to submit notes from them, which I think most programs do. But with the notes, there were exacting criteria. Like he had to, for whatever the problem was, he had to include 1 to 2 evidence-based articles about why he chose that treatment plan. I never had a student ever have to do that. And that is phenomenal. So I actually talked to that teacher. I think they've got right now, they are my top recommended program. They're actually beating out UAB, which is where everybody goes around me. Mercer, if you're in Georgia. Scott says I may end up with only 1 or 2 preceptors in my program. I think that's okay. Like I said, the student that I had that was the best, we were together for 3 rotations. So that's okay. In some ways, you grow more because that person knows you so well. So that's not a hardship. I don't think they'll love you. They'll love you. I'm telling you, the people that show up for these kind of things are not the ones who need to hear this message. Okay. The ones who are reading the blog are not the ones who need it. They're the oblivious ones who are just checking off the box or doing it. Oh my God. If I could share stories with y'all and not, out people, I would. Sometime if we ever have a drink, I'll let you know about the insane things that NP students have done that you're like, what? What made you decide that was a good idea? People are fun. We're all different. Okay, I'm at a minute. I'm an hour and 16 minutes. So I hope y'all have enjoyed this whole this was a long one. Let me know if y'all have thoughts about next week. Chamberlain, interesting. Very interesting. I'm going to leave it there. I'm just going to say very interesting. I'm glad that you're having a good experience. That is a phenomenal idea that they are sharing with y'all. I highly, highly recommend it. I can't talk about it enough. Get that stuff as you go along because it'll be very hard to get later on. Also, if you guys, which video is it? I made a video. Okay, I think it's called Things You Can Do to Find an NP Job or something like that. I'm wearing a white shirt in the video. But in that one, I talk about making a calling card, which is like basically a postcard. It's bigger than a business card, but go on there and watch it because it's something that you can do now, like even before you go into your rotations. And as you're doing rotations and you're networking with, even if the team that you're with isn't hiring, I guarantee you they know someone who is. And as you meet people, give them this card. I mean, you won't have the portfolio ready until after you graduate, but that's something you probably give them at an interview anyways. But that card you can hand out all the time. And that is a great icebreaker if you're the kind of person who's not good at delivering that 2-minute elevator speech about, hey, this is why you should hire me. Just give them that card. And then they have something tangible and they remember your name and your contact stuff is there. So go watch that video if you're going into rotations and create one and take it with you. Network. This is where you're going to get your job from, your clinicals. What do you mean? Chamberlain, Simmons, Yale, and Georgetown. That's where your preceptors will be? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to end this here, friends. Thank y'all so much for joining. And I will see y'all next week. Maybe my basement will be done then. The other students at my clinical site. Oh, interesting. All over. You got them from all over. Interesting. Yale. 802 Merce says, I'm on week 4 of didactics. It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun. All right, guys. I'll see y'all next Thursday. Thanks so much for coming.